body and grinding down the
It appears that Matchroom has made a very big signing. Skye Nicholson. Amateur standout Skye Nicholson took to social media and stated, "And so it begins. I am delighted to announce I have signed a multi-year deal with Matchroom. As I enter the professional ranks, can't wait to box all over the world and bring world titles back to Australia live on DAZN. Debut March 2022. Australian amateur star Skye Nicholson has signed a long-term promotional deal with Eddie Hearn's Matchroom Boxing and will make her highly anticipated professional debut at featherweight in 2022. The 26-year-old has helped pave the way for female boxing in Australia, winning gold at the 2018 Commonwealth Games and Gold Coast, and more recently representing her country at the Tokyo Olympics. Nicholson narrowly missed out on becoming Australia's first female boxing medalist since the 1988 Olympics, when she lost to Great Britain's Karis Artingstall after 3 tightly contested rounds in July. Managed by Paul Reddy and STN Sports, slick southpaw Nicholson now turns her attention to making her mark in the thriving professional scene at a time when boxing has never been bigger in her homeland. The Australian boxing scene, which we've often talked about here on the channel, is a developing market, a booming market that has been getting a lot of attention as of late due to fighters like Tim Tszyu.
Can't forget about George Kambosos,
who has since returned to his native Australia on the heels of his very big win over Teofimo Lopez, upset win. Fighters like Tim Tszyu, George Kambosos,
crossover stars like Paul Galen,
those who came before them, like Jeff Horn, like Anthony Mundine, like Jeff Fennick before them.
The Australian boxing scene's going to places it's never gone before.
Skye Nicholson is very much part of that picture. It's a dream come true to be signing with the biggest and best promotional company in the world, said Nicholson. I can't wait to make big waves and show the world what I can do. I'm about to put Australian women's boxing on notice. I have built an incredible team around me and have all the faith in the world that my career is going to be guided by the best, and I can't thank STN and Matchroom enough. I'm delighted to welcome Skye to the Matchroom boxing team as we continue our expansion into Australia, said Matchroom Sport Chairman Eddie Hearn. Skye is a special talent who turns professional at the perfect time, and we look forward to boxing her all around the world to grow her profile and develop her as a fighter as she chases world titles and undisputed championships. Skye is a rare talent inside and outside the ring, said director of STN Sports Paul Reddy. She had a fan-friendly, slick southpaw style and has the ability to be a global star. You will see her wow fans in the UK, USA, and most importantly, built back home in Australia.
She's supposed to be debuting in the featherweight division in March of next year.
The featherweight division where Amanda Cerrano, who's going to be in action tomorrow night on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Tyrone Woodley 2. The featherweight division where Amanda is unified champion, holding both the WBC and WBO titles. Mexico's own Erica Cruz holds the WBA title, and Denmark's own Sarah Mahfoud holds the IBF title. Because Skye Nicholson's fledgling professional career is in such capable hands, STN, Matchroom, Eddie Hearn behind her, it's conceivable that very quickly, Skye may develop an even bigger profile than some of the champions at this weight. People might become a lot more familiar with Skye than, say, Sarah Mahfoud. Most people don't know who Sarah Mahfoud is, or Erica Cruz, for that matter. They have become a lot more acquainted with Amanda Cerrano over the years, though Amanda is one of the bigger names in the sport of women's boxing.
Not exclusive to the featherweight division.
It's always beneficial for a division, a weight class, to have an amateur standout with a big promotional engine behind them like Skye Nicholson, because that will bring finance and attention to the weight class that not just Skye can benefit from. You have to understand that in the featherweight division, the biggest name up until now has been Amanda Cerrano. Thus, any girl that's looking for a decent paycheck,
They'd be looking for a fight with her.
when Skye Nicholson debuts as a professional and arrives on the scene in March of next year, with that Matchroom promotional engine behind her, she is going to quickly become a person of special interest to almost anybody and everybody at 126 pounds.
She's fortunate because that's a densely populated division.
It's not a barren weight class like the women's heavyweight division, light heavyweight division, or super middleweight division. There are ample fights, ample fighters to go around at 126 pounds. There are currently 3 active reigning world champions. Given that Skye Nicholson is an amateur standout, comes from a deep amateur background, it's conceivable that she will move at a more accelerated rate than some other boxers. It may not even be that long before Skye finds herself fighting for a world title.
She might fight for a world title before somebody else would because she's got a deep amateur background.
You know, Amanda Cerrano not that long ago was talking about bringing consolidation to this division by becoming its undisputed champion. That's what the story was. The story now is she's reshifted her focus back to that Katie Taylor fight, which is supposed to go down sometime next year. When you think about that fight, and you think about how, if it's a close fight, there may be a sequel. We may get 2 fights out of that, and that might take up the better portion of Amanda Cerrano's 2022.
That's saying we may not see an undisputed champion crowned at featherweight next year.
The division, as it were, may remain divided throughout 2022 going into 2023, and currently there are 3 active reigning world champions at this weight. Amanda Cerrano is one, the unified champion, Sarah Mahfoud and Erica Cruz, those are the 2 other champions. And provided that they stay champions, or if those belts change hands either way, there are ample opportunities out there for Skye Nicholson to develop in 2022 so that she can perhaps challenge for a title in 2023, maybe 2024. Due to the ungodly hour broadcast times for the Tokyo Olympics here in America, I didn't get to see Skye Nicholson in action. I haven't gotten the opportunity to see her box, though I will now.
Look up what this kid's all about.
Because I'm getting the impression that Skye Nicholson could be a game changer. I mean, Matchroom thought enough of her to court her and sign her fresh out of the amateurs.
I've been hearing a lot of good things about her, though I didn't have the chance to see her in action myself.
Keep your eyes peeled for the professional debut of Sky's the Limit Nicholson, March 2022. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Canelo Alvarez on trainer-manager Eddie Reynoso requesting for him to fight for the WBC Cruiserweight title. I didn't even know about that. I heard about it on social media, what Eddie did. If Eddie tries to do something crazy, I'm always in. I'm his warrior. That's essentially saying that Canelo Alvarez didn't really realize that he would be moving up to cruiserweight to fight Lunga Makabu, but because it was a decision that his trusted, longtime trainer and manager, Eddie Reynoso, made...
Fuck it, why not?
I'm sure that at the Reynoso gym, Canelo Alvarez has spent some time sparring the likes of Andy Ruiz, former unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz, sparring the likes of...
Frankie Sanchez.
That's likely why Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso are confident that they can go to cruiserweight for a one-off and pick up a world title, make that history.
And that's what gets lost in translation.
You have a small contingent of American fight fans who really aren't familiar with Lunga Makabu. They look at him as a nobody, even though he is in fact a reigning world champion, and they ask themselves, well, what makes him more important than fighting Jermall Charlo? What makes him more important than fighting David Benavidez? Well, Canelo Alvarez gets the chance to make history and pick up a world title fighting him.
Well, that's those guys' problem. They don't want to make history.
They just want to make money, not realizing that making history and making money, legacy and finance go hand in hand in the sport of boxing, because it is those legacy fights that get you the most money. I've seen a sentiment expressed in some quarters, small ones, that Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run is insignificant. Collecting trinket titles from easy targets doesn't really mean that much at all.
Really?
There are those people with those opinions, and they're entitled to them, though those people and those opinions are in the minority.
Most boxing fans don't feel that way.
The paying public, I should say, that portion of the boxing community that's advocating for Canelo to fight Jermall Charlo, advocating for Canelo to give David Benavidez an opportunity, that
small group
portion of the boxing community must not represent the paying public, because if they did, it would show up in the numbers. Jermall Charlo's numbers, David Benavidez's numbers.
But it doesn't. There's not much interest in who those guys fight.
Numbers don't lie, ladies and gentlemen. And Jermall Charlo, David Benavidez, they ain't got the numbers. Canelo does. So what that tells me is that the paying public, The portion of the boxing community that actually pays to see boxing, they're on Canelo Alvarez's side. Canelo Alvarez, who addressed his critics, the people saying he's ducking David Benavidez or Jermall Charlo, he said, "I beat the best at 168 pounds. Then they say he's scared of that guy. I don't avoid anybody. Mention a champion they fought before. How many? Haters are always going to be haters, and that's what Canelo Alvarez's critics here today appear to be. Haters, because how could you be upset with this guy? He's fighting more often than everyone else, and fighting world champions, not stiffs.
More often than everyone else.
If it were so easy to unify the super middleweight division, then why has it stood divided all this time? I mean, if it were so easy to do, then why didn't David Benavidez do it? He was there before Canelo got there. If it's so easy to move up to cruiserweight, then why don't Jermall Charlo pack his bags and head up there, win a world title? Since it's so easy, it would certainly be more interesting than what he has been doing. Oh, I've come across one or two or three individuals who aren't impressed. They really aren't impressed with Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run, beating the drum for Jermall Charlo, beating the drum all of a sudden for David Benavidez. I've come across one or two, three of these individuals here online, and what these online guys don't realize is that the only place they have a voice is online.
You're not affecting change spending a whole lot of time on the internet. You do realize that.
And these opinionated individuals that harbor the opinions that they harbor, what they don't realize is that they're in the minority. They do not represent the paying public. The paying public likes what Canelo Alvarez is doing. They liked his undisputed run, and I have no doubts they're going to like his fight at cruiserweight if he follows through on that. Whatever Canelo Alvarez does at this point is A-okay with the paying public because he's doing more, much more, than his contemporaries.
Earlier this week, I conducted a poll.
I conducted a poll here on YouTube. I conducted a poll on Twitter. Conducted a poll on those two platforms.
Two polls.
To find out what people felt about Canelo Alvarez's resume compared to Andre Ward's resume. Andre Ward, who many people feel has been shading Canelo Alvarez for some time now. And, when I conducted this poll on these two very different platforms, the results came back the same. The results actually came back the same. The only people that feel that Andre Ward has a better resume than Canelo Alvarez are people that come in the 7th to 9th percentile.
Very small minority.
There were actually a lot of people arguing in the comments under those polls.
I was surprised to see it.
Polls, they're anecdotal. That's just how people feel. Myself, I'm a facts and stats guy, and based on the facts, based on the stats, the statistics, Canelo Alvarez's resume is head and shoulders above Andre Ward's. Canelo's a 4-division champion. Andre Ward is a 2-division champion. Canelo Alvarez has been unified at 2 weight classes like Andre Ward, but Canelo Alvarez made history at super middleweight. He became undisputed, something that Andre Ward did not do, even though the bulk of his work was in the super middleweight division. Couple that with the number of active, reigning world champions that Canelo Alvarez has beat, guys that he actually took belts from, and it's clear to see that Canelo Alvarez has a better resume than Andre Ward, based on the facts, based on the stats. But a lot of other guys, they like to go a more anecdotal route when they don't like the way the facts stack up. These are the guys that wanted to argue in the comments under those polls. And listen,
look,
waste your breath if you want to.
You're not convincing anyone with your fucking anecdote.
The same way that Canelo Alvarez's critics aren't convincing anyone that he's avoiding Jermall Charlo and he's avoiding David Benavidez by fighting a fucking cruiserweight.
Simultaneously targeting 2 light heavyweights.
His body of work, what's already on paper, his existing track record shows that he fights better fighters than Jermall Charlo fights, than David Benavidez fights. In fact, he's fought better fighters than they are.
Until further notice.
Until they step up in class, until they go out there and do something that gives us reason to believe otherwise. Canelo's accustomed to dealing with better guys and higher ranked fighters than you guys are, so why the hell would anyone believe that he's avoiding you?
That narrative and those anecdotes aren't convincing anyone of anything.
So you can belittle Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run and his ascent to the cruiserweight division. You can belittle that too, but what the paying public is telling themselves is, if it were that easy, Jermall Charlo or David Benavidez would have done it by now.
Instead of fighting the ham and egg guys they've been fighting.
Finally, tomorrow afternoon here stateside, we're going to be seeing the sequel to Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora. Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora 2. Stacked undercard.
2 fighters I'm very excited about.
Unbeaten up-and-comers Rhiannon Dixon and Sandy Ryan. Rhiannon Dixon is going to be fighting Vaida Maisokaite for the second time. She actually made a professional debut against Vaida Maisokaita back in 2019. Vaida Maisokaita is a last-minute replacement. This isn't who Rhiannon Dixon was going to be facing originally.
And she beat her before. I think she'll beat her again.
Except Rhiannon might stop Vaida Maisokaita this time, as Rhiannon Dixon is a bit more experienced than she was when they first met. Sandy Ryan is fighting Argentinia's own Maria Capriolo. I think Sandy Ryan's going to knock her out the way she knocked her last opponent out. Alen Babic is going to be fighting. A guilty pleasure of mine watching Alen Babic work. I know he's flawed. I know he has limitations, but man alive, is he a fun guy to watch. One of the more interesting fights on the card, Carlos Gongora, 20-0. Against Lerone Richards, 15-0. Battle of the unbeaten.
Super middleweight contest.
Two of the more promising unbeaten up-and-comers at 168 pounds. I like Carlos Gongora to win the fight. I've seen both guys in action. Lerone Richards, he's a bit of a pure boxer.
Whereas Carlos has got more dog in him.
More of a mean streak, more aggressive. Lerone Richards, he's an economic guy. Stick and move kind of guy that if he's not careful, he could get outworked. And that's what I think is going to happen tomorrow afternoon. I've got Carlos Gongora winning that fight.
I'm not sure if he knocks Lerone Richards out or if he wins a points decision.
But I am leaning towards Carlos to win. I'm picking him to win, and who knows? We'll see what happens. When it comes to the main event of that same card, Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora 2. When I heard there was going to be a second fight, I asked myself, what could Derek Chisora possibly do differently in a rematch that he didn't do in the first fight? Because as far as I'm concerned, he won that first fight and he was robbed of a decision. Derek is a characteristic pressure fighter who looks to crowd a guy and land big hooks deep in the pocket. It's not likely that Derek makes very many, if any, adjustments ahead of this rematch, and it's for this reason that I'm actually going with Joseph Parker to win. Haven't you noticed that Derek Chisora doesn't have much luck in rematches? He did better in the first Tyson Fury fight than he did in the second one. He's outclassed in the second one. Dillian White, the first fight was very competitive. You could argue that Derek did enough to win that fight, but the second time out,
He got flattened.
he got put on his ass. He got knocked out. I see a situation to where Joseph Parker, underwhelming as he might be, he's more capable of making adjustments than Derek Chisora is. Derek's going to fight the same fight that he always fights. That might get him the win, or that might get him knocked out.
And this time, I think it's going to get him knocked out.
I know how it sounds. Joseph Parker has often been accused of being too polite for the heavyweight division. No killer instincts. But this time, maybe he'll get off to an earlier start than he did the last time. The last time, he got dropped early in the fight. Maybe this time, he'll take what he learned from that first fight, apply it to the second one, pick up where they left off. We'll see. I'm going with Joseph Parker by way of knockout or technical knockout.
Tomorrow afternoon.